Hello and welcome to Lightways at Life Astrologer with me, Anna Isabel, and Anne Whitaker is back. Hello, Anne.
Hello again, Anna. I think this is round 3 of the cycle sessions, and we've already done a couple before that. So we know each other now.
We certainly do, and it's an absolute pleasure to have you back. And
Well, it's lovely to be back.
so we're continuing on this theme of cycles, and you suggested, and how could I resist, talking about Jupiter Uranus cycles, because of course we do have a rather important Jupiter Uranus conjunction looming. So
We do.
tell us about the Jupiter Uranus cycle.
Well, I did send you the link to my book, but I don't think you wouldn't have a time to do anything more than just have a quick look at it. But just to say that I became obsessed. Do you become obsessed with things, Anna, as an astrologer? Confess, do you?
Yeah, of course. It's you
Okay.
find out something or you spot something, and you have to exhaust all the possible ways of learning more about it.
And yourself in the process,
Yeah.
because I was looking at, this was 1996, and I was in the middle of doing my Center for Psychological Astrology diploma at the time, and I was already thinking about what my thesis topic, because we had to write 40 or 50,000 words of thesis. And I I started my thesis on the moon's nodes, but in the meantime, I became obsessed with the upcoming Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, because in 1997, on the 16th of February, Jupiter met Uranus at 5 degrees of Aquarius. And I thought, well, all these claims about Jupiter, Uranus, Jupiter is the great benefic. Uranus breaks through to new levels of reality as yet unknown. I mean, I remember Liz Green saying to us very trenchantly, if you think you can predict it, it's not Uranus transits you're looking at. Liz had a very inimitable way of delivering, and she said that to us. And by gosh, she's absolutely right. So I was looking at Jupiter coming up with to Uranus. And at that time, I hadn't clocked that my ascendant is exactly on the Jupiter-Uranus midpoint in my own horoscope, with Uranus away up there in the 10th house and Jupiter in the 3rd. And at the time I became obsessed with the conjunction, Pluto was crossing my 3rd house Jupiter. So how's that for bang on? So I decided, I was interviewed in a local magazine called Connections later on in 1996, and I suddenly had the idea to ask people, anybody who had anything in their horoscope at 5 degrees of Aquarius, to get in touch with me, because that's where the conjunction was going to happen. And my assumption was, my theory, because you have to put the theory out and then test it in practice. My theoretical assumption was that even though there were all these different lives, and 17 people ended up being in the study, 17, 10 of whom knew some astrology, they were students of mine, 7 knew no astrology at all. And they all had this 5-degree Aquarius signature. The sun, Venus, the nodes, the moon, whatever. And I thought, well, okay, these are very different people with different lives and different charts, but surely if this zap of Jupiter-Uranus energy is coming through 5 degrees Aquarius, they're going to register something significant. Because if they don't, then astrological theory, frankly, doesn't stand up to close examination. So while I was writing my Moon's Nodes thesis, I was also researching the adventures of 17 people between 1997 and 1998, because the conjunction happened in February the 16th, 1997, and then came back again. They came back to conjunct again in the end of August, and then back again, quite a reasonably wide orbit, still conjunct the following January. So it was really a period of just about a year. And so I sent out 3 sets of questionnaires asking people what had been happening to them. I made the questions as neutral as I could. And the feedback was amazing, because every single one of them, and there was no difference really between the people who knew astrology and the people who didn't. And what I said to my students was, look, you really need to try and avoid as far as you can self-fulfilling prophecy or, you know, confirmation bias here. I know you can't do it totally, but try and be scientists. And the other people, of course, didn't. They only knew sun sign astrology. They were people who had the sun in 5 degrees Aquarius, so they hadn't a clue. And what the significant difference was that the people who already had Jupiter-Uranus aspects in their horoscopes and who were strongly linked in with Jupiter and or Uranus or both were the people who had the most significant experiences. And that kind of, one of the really nice things about this piece of research was that it really confirmed a lot of astrological theory. And there was one wonderful bit where the Uranus went direct. Uranus stationed in October of 1997. I think it was stationed on 5 degrees of Aquarius and then went direct. And you know that astrological theories tells us that stationary planets about to go direct are really very powerful. Well, I asked a question of my researchers, and the person who gave me the most fantastic feedback was the person who was most strongly plugged into Jupiter-Uranus in the first place. And when that happened, she was away up in the wilds of the north of Scotland with a bunch of very tough inner city kids who had never done anything artistic or creative. She was fed up about having to do it. She wasn't feeling inspired. She's a dancer. And what she did was, on that time, she brought her astrology into creating a piece of theatre and dance. And these kids totally responded to the whole thing. And she wrote this wonderful piece of description, which you'll find in the book. Anyone who wants to acquire the book will find the full description of this. And it was just stunning. And she was amazed by it herself. So there you go. That's just a little flavor.
I think it's worth mentioning the title of the book, which I had intended to do at the start, but didn't. And so it is called Jupiter Meets Uranus. And I do love the subtitles for both bits. From erotic to stargazing, that's the 1997 to 98 conjunction in Aquarius. And then Tales from the Wild Ride, 2010 to 2011. I think the first, both titles require a little bit of explanation, because I think they both evoke that Jupiter-Uranus energy. So I'd like to tease that out a bit. So let's begin with from erotic bathing to stargazing. What prompted this title?
Well, I was being a bit naughty. I mean, the book was eventually published by the American Federation of Astrologers at a time when I wasn't at all savvy with regard to promotions. So there's only one 5-star review on Amazon for that, although I got loads of really good reviews from my colleagues, which are on my site. But anyway, I got this book published, and there was one wonderful piece of description from one of the participants. And I put that in as a subtitle because I thought, throw in a bit of sex and that will help to sell the book. That was my naughty thought. There wasn't actually any sex in it. But this couple had been working towards creating a new home. They were both from broken relationships, and they were getting together, renovating this house. And on the day that he was one of my students, she didn't know anything about astrology. On the actual day of the conjunction, they declared their new home ready because they climbed into their double-ended bath, purposefully selected for erotic bathing, and had a bath. And the feedback he sent was, we felt we had created our home completely. He said there was really no sex, there was a lot of washing, but it was the symbolism that mattered. So I just loved that. I thought that was wonderful. So that's just one example.
I love that because
it's real life.
It is real life. And here you have a situation where they have clearly been through a great deal of upheaval in the process of creating this home. So anyone who has been through renovation projects will recognize that Uranian energy of need to basically just live very basically. I was going to say with scant resources at times, because it does have
Scanty and
scant
very
resources.
scanty of
Yeah,
anything on the final day.
yeah, exactly. And you recognize that Uranus, that upheaval, chaos and upheaval accompany renovation projects.
Yep.
But
Yep.
they're also incredibly creative as well. And so I can just see somebody going through a Uranus transit in the middle of a big renovation project. That would not be for the faint-hearted, I think.
Absolutely,
But
absolutely not. Yeah.
With a Jupiterian energy coming through, that creativity, that sense of freedom, the sense of fun,
Yep.
that would come through it. And yes, of course you would celebrate it, having a bath together in a specially chosen bathtub.
Why not? And the other thing is, Anna, that the Jupiter Uranus conjunction was part of an amazing bowl shape. It really was. And in fact, I've got if I can quickly find the picture here, I will show it to you, because what was interesting about the January period of the research was that people were reporting a lot of thwarting and a lot of difficulty and a lot of problems, and just generally a difficult thwarting time, which was very Saturnian. Here we are. There's I don't know if you can see that.
Not
There's
very.
the chart.
Yes,
There's
the shape.
There's
Yes.
the chart. You can see Jupiter Uranus up there in that very heavily loaded house. And
Yeah.
you can see that Saturn, where's Saturn? Saturn is, where is it? I can't see Saturn. It is here.
I can't actually make out the glyphs very well, but I can see the
Anyway,
shape.
let's just to assume, there's a Mars-Saturn opposition right across the ascendant descendant.
Right.
And that is the container for the bowl shape. So there's an upper bowl shape with Mars, Saturn basically as the container. And
Right.
so, what was released, eventually the Jupiter Uranus energy would be released, but not before they went through a lot of thwarting and blocking during January, when Saturn and Mars were dominant at that particular point. And everybody in the study went through that kind of difficulty, one way or another. And several of them were to do with building projects, interestingly, Saturn, as you're talking about.
Yes. So the participants, did they experience this conjunction as a conjunction, all of them, to a part of their charts? Or did they experience it as squares, oppositions, trines, a variety of different types of transits? So were they all experiencing the same transit, or was there a variety of transits, I think is what I'm asking.
I'm just thinking back. I haven't reread it recently, so I'm a bit vague, but I wanted people who basically would have the zap of Jupiter Uranus through 5 degrees of Aquarius, either on the 5-degree point, which had the Sun, Venus node or the Moon there, or else opposite. So there was a couple of people who had Jupiter Uranus opposite their chart point. Okay. And there was a couple of people who had it. I don't think I included any squares. I think it was just either conjunctions or oppositions. So it was, okay. So there were people, most of them, I think about a dozen of them out of the 17, maybe more, had a planetary body sitting on 5 degrees of Aquarius. So nearly all of them had Jupiter Uranus conjunct the Sun, the Moon, Venus, or whatever. Okay, but well,
that's good.
Yeah,
because
I also put the study in a bigger context, because I looked through 2,500 years of history at Jupiter Uranus conjunctions. I like the big picture, Anna.
Yeah, that's a very big picture. So what did you find?
And I can give you just a little snippet out of that, which is that I tracked the pulse of Jupiter Uranus conjunctions through fire, air, earth, and water through 2,500 years. And what I found was that the 2 blocks of time, 500-year blocks of time, which had the most Jupiter, which had the most Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions in fire and air, and therefore you would expect Jupiter, Uranus and fire and air to be very future-oriented, very innovative, were the period of the rise of the Roman Empire and the 1500 to 2000 period of history. And both these periods, I think anyone would agree, in general terms, were hugely significant developmental points and periods in human history.
So you're looking at a 500-year period in each of those.
Yep.
Yeah.
So it was really quite mind-blowing.
I was just thinking about that Roman period, because there was quite a lot of innovation that came through in that time.
A lot.
In terms of technology and building. Funnily enough, building.
And the thing is that the Roman Empire spread over most of the known world during that time. And what we had from 1500 to 2000 was the Renaissance, the great sea voyages of discovery. Ponce de Leon landed on the coast of America under a Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in, I think it was 1533. I'll have to check it. But there was an exact Jupiter-Uranus conjunction, I think it was in Aries, when he landed on what was to be Cape Canaveral. And in 1969, there was a major Jupiter-Uranus conjunction in Libra at the same time as the moon landing. And the whole thing was blasted off from Cape Canaveral, which is exactly where Ponce de Leon had landed several hundred years previously. So, I mean, there was just some astonishing links that really took my breath away.
So I want to come back to that conjunction in air, in earth or water, because well, obviously Jupiter is the ruler of Pisces also, so there is an affinity with water with Jupiter that people might not automatically think of. I'm just wondering, I think the question I'm trying to ask, my thought process is this: fire and water are masculine signs. So you wouldn't be surprised. You would expect the obvious for things
fire
to be
and air signs. Fire and air signs are masculine.
Exactly.
Not
did I?
You said fire and water. Yeah.
Sorry.
It's all right. All right.
So fire and air signs, which is what we were discussing, you would expect the influence, the evidence to be obvious, because they are masculine, and masculine energy is very, very obvious. It's outward, it's action oriented. You can't really miss it, I think, is what I'm.
No, that's absolutely right.
And so therefore it's not surprising that those 500-year periods where fire and air were the dominant in which Jupiter and Uranus met, that you would see a lot of what some would call progress. So the obvious external manifestations of we could put it like that. So what happens when it's in the quieter elements of earth and water?
One or two interesting things to say about that. I think one of the things that I always used to stress with my astrology students and clients is that astrology uses the terms masculine and feminine, but not within gender. That these are not gender terms, these are descriptions of energy. And fire air energy is masculine, whether it belongs to a female gender or a male gender. And I think it's really important to say that to astrology students and clients. Whereas earth and water energy is described as feminine, it's more introverted and more reflective. The whole thing, the whole point about Jupiter Uranus is to see no limits. which makes it frankly dangerous energy, makes it dangerous energy. It has to be restrained and curbed. And what's interesting about your question when you talked about the affinity between Pisces, Jupiter, and water, is that the 2010-11 conjunction was it met in let me think, the 8th of June 2010 at 0 degrees of Aries. So it was absolutely fire. But then when it went retrograde, it appeared in the autumn in water in Pisces. And what we had during that particular conjunction was the eruption of the volcano in Iceland. So that was Earth, that eruption. And I can vividly remember lying in bed, drinking a cup of tea, with my suitcase packed, really looking forward to going off on holiday. And Ian came downstairs saying, I've just been watching the telly, we might as well unpack our suitcases. There's been a huge explosion and flights are off all over Europe. So there was that. Then there was the Deep Horizons oil disaster. There was an oil disaster, a massive oil spill off the coast of America. Need I go on? There was also around the time, I think it was either at the time of the year of that conjunction or just after, there was the terrible Fukuyama disaster, Japanese nuclear disaster. So you can really see, there were other things as well, but you know, we can't go into all of them. You can really see the influence of water there. It's so interesting. And the other thing to say is that, I hope I can get this right because it's quite complex, but basically you got the Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions going through a period where fire and air predominated. That was the period of the Roman Empire. And then fire and air predominated between 1500 and 2000. But then what would happen is you would have a period with two elements, fire and air, earth and water, predominating. And then there would be a mixed transition period, and then you would move into the opposite set of elements. So what's happening with us, interestingly, is that we are now in a mixed period of elements, which is, you know, seen in the 2010-11 one, where we had a mix of fire and water. But in 2050, now you know how that date keeps cropping up. You know, we've got to have this, that, or the next thing sorted climate-wise by 2050. From 2050 onwards, the conjunction doesn't appear in fire or air for about 600 years. It's earth and water. And one of the speculations I've made in the book is that perhaps we're going to have to use our considerable ingenuity, turning back in on ourselves, in order to work out how to prevent the damage we've caused from all our expansiveness from wiping us all out, basically. So I find it really fascinating that in, you know, it was when I was researching the first conjunction in 1997, 98, that I could see that picture emerging. And of course, it's become more and more evident and more urgent as we proceed, you know, through the 2020s towards the 2050. So really, I think the point about this is that by looking at the big pictures of these planetary conjunctions, cycles, and you can do that with Saturn, Pluto, you can do it with all of them. I'd love to do it with all of them, but I don't think I'm going to live long enough. You can really see the pulse beat of the broader pictures of history. And that really, I have so many 12th house planets that I love connecting to the big, big picture.
So which periods in history did you see the water and earth conjunctions? Did you have a look at, get a chance to look at those?
I'm just trying to think out. You must excuse me. I'm going to, oh yeah, here we are. Table 3, overview. In the 18th century, there were 7 Jupiter-Uranus conjunctions, 4 fire and 3 air. In the 19th century, there were 7 conjunctions, 2 fire, 3 air, So still fire near dominant, but one earth and one water. So earth and water is creeping in. And that was probably around the time when far-seeing people would be beginning to ask questions about the impact of industrialization on our world. And then in the 20th, can I just run through this? In the 20th century, we had 8 conjunctions, 3 fire, 3 air, so still fire air dominant, 1 earth, 1 water. But in the 21st century we're now in, we have 7 conjunctions, and we have 1 mixed, that's the Pisces Aries one that we've just been through recently. We've got 1 fire, we've got 1 air, then we've got 2 earth and 2 water. So in the 21st century, we're moving into absolutely the dominance of earth and water. So that's how it works.
So I think it's very interesting because,
isn't it?
We know that there's always a need to balance things out, and within an individual, we want to balance out the opposing energies within ourselves. And and going back to that whole image of the alchemical king and queen, the aim being the union of the two, so that they're operating as one, so that masculine and feminine are very much equal and operating together. So what we're really talking about here is the balancing up of masculine and feminine. And I think actually, what that says to me is that we can perhaps expect an expansion in the area of nurturing, how we nurture ourselves, how we nurture each other, how we nurture everything on the planet. And I think that could be, that's tremendously exciting. So it might not be that sense of progress that perhaps society has become associated or used to, with new inventions, new technologies that are full of, wheels and whiz and bang, but more a case of coming back to understanding how to work with nature. So there could be an expansion of the understanding of how to work with nature and how to make the most of nature. And I think, and when I say make the most of nature, I don't mean in the exploitive sense.
No, because that's fire ways of being.
That's very fire and earth approach, but much more about how to make use of nature, as in understanding nature, supporting nature, and allowing nature to decide for itself. Pretty much my approach to gardening, I think.
Well, yes, yeah. Well, that's what you're illustrating. I mean, what you've said, what you've said here has generated all sorts of thoughts in my head. The most immediate one being that in a paradoxical way. I mean, one of the reasons I like looking at how the big picture patterns trickle down into the small, in inverted commas, everyday lives of each of us. In some ways, individuals have more agency than collectives do. You can control what you do with your little bit of garden more than, let's say, a local community where they're fighting amongst themselves with regard to whether housing should be built or we should nurture the land, can make any progress. But what's interesting about what you say also, Anna, is that it connects to the Jupiter Uranus conjunction in fire, in Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Aquarius. That was the one that I researched in 1997. The one I researched in 2010-11 was in earth and fire. So the conjunction was air, then earth and fire. But this new one that's coming up in April is going to be a Jupiter Uranus conjunction in earth at 23 Taurus. And what I'm finding really interesting is that the environmental movement just began towards the end of the 19th century, when there was one earth and one water conjunction. Perhaps people were beginning to see the consequences. And then that kind of developed in the 20th century, when there was still one earth and one water. But coming on to your point about nurturing nature in the 21st century, it's become much more critically evident to us the amount of damage that a fire-air approach has been taking. That the two earth and two water and one mixed element pictures shows that as human beings, we are becoming more concerned about earth and water and nourishing.
And there are a number of issues which the whole environmental question has been grossly oversimplified and has been, I think, abused by the authorities as a means of extracting money from the public and controlling the public. The real issue behind the environment is the relationship that is it comes from a relationship that's exploitive by big industrial farming as well the corporate world. So this is it's so much more than about whether or not you're getting into your car. That is minimal in
absolutely
impact.
And one is
to what big agriculture, big pharma, because big pharma, it's all the chemicals and everything that go onto the land. This is where the real issue is, and this is about earth. And it's really important that we as individuals understand, whilst we are being blamed for our destruction of the planet, when actually we're not the cause of this. It is those who are earning money from the exploitation and damage who are doing it and who are now blaming us. So we need to get that absolutely clear in our minds. And then
I agree with you. I agree with you about that. And that's why, you know, for me, this is the first time I've revisited this table for years. And it's in the context of our conversation and in the context of what's happening in the environment. And you know, okay, we can be very negative and pessimistic and frightened, and it would be foolish to say that we didn't have good reason for that, because look at the state of the planet. But what this big picture is telling us is that we are moving towards a period where we're going to have to do a lot less fire-air innovation and a lot more earth-water nurturing in order to preserve the planet we're on. So what I find fascinating is that this Jupiter-Uranus, just looking at one planetary cycle throughout a few hundred years of history, lets you see this taking place slowly. Now, that's the kind of prediction I don't mind doing. I don't like doing prediction, but this big picture prediction is amazing, really.
And
I must not.
And I can
I'm
tell
getting
you,
too excited. I've got to calm down.
I'm very excited about something as wonderful as that, because the seeds of what you are describing, I am seeing all around me. And funnily enough, the beginnings of it began with Pluto going into Capricorn, because right around the time when Pluto went into Capricorn in 2008, there was an absolute upsurge in the number of people taking up allotments. That has since declined a bit, because managing an allotment, and I know this from personal experience,
a lot of work,
is no mean feat. But there was this huge upsurge that went on. And although it's kind of tailed off a little bit as the reality set in for a lot of people, what I'm now seeing at the tail end of Pluto in Capricorn is the beginnings of Pluto in Aquarius coming, and groups of people sharing land to grow their own food, doing no-dig methods, which are very much about the nurturing of the earth, looking at how to have clean water that is free from the chemicals that are involved in the cleaning of sewage, which we then drink.
Yes,
So there's a lot going on there at a very grassroots level.
mm,
And then moving towards this one keeps cropping up, the idea of compost toilets, but in a much more sophisticated way. So I'm looking at all of these groups doing this and I'm
mm,
thinking, oh, this is interesting. And now
mhm.
you would expect Uranus to bring us technology. And so we're thinking very much about technologies that are going to help to enhance nature rather than actually. But I think that they're going to be coming from grassroots. It's not the corporates. It's what's coming from
I'm
below.
dying to tell you, I'm dying to tell you about something local. I mean, first of all, you're describing the outline of my next piece of writing that's in my head, because I'm going to set the Jupiter Uranus conjunction that's coming in Earth within the bigger context of Pluto moving into Aquarius, because that you've just spelled it out very, very clearly. And what we have at the back of, I live in a tenement 3 floors up overlooking the River Kelvin, and what we have behind us is what used to be a football pitch and is now land owned and managed, not owned, but managed by the people, which the local council and nobody can touch for the next 25 years. We got an asset transfer. And that took us decades of fighting. My husband was involved for 10 years in keeping the developers off the land. Their project was scuppered at the last minute. But my friend and colleague, Emily Cutts, she won't mind me mentioning her because I've already written about her, and she features in Uranus through Aries, Fire and Fury in my essay collection, Postcards in the Future. She led a campaign, and we made it international, and we got the land for ourselves. And there's 23 local schools do forest school training on the land and take kids down there. There's our own growing area where I'm going to be picking up some potatoes from the land tomorrow. I've just sent a message saying there's potatoes, come and get them. So we have our own community garden. There's all kinds of activities. There's a maze that people walk. There's trees everywhere. And every time I walk through there, it makes me feel happy, because that is our land. And the local people, there's no rubbish. Volunteers look after it. And it's just a great place. So you should come up, Anna,
Oh,
and
wow.
visit. I'll
I am
take you for a walk in the
about that.
children's room.
So, I mean, firstly, I just want to say congratulations. What a tremendous victory. And that is
Yeah,
exactly what it's exactly what I'm seeing happening
exactly. Yeah,
right country is
that's
land
just to be
small
describing. Absolutely.
small holdings. And
Mm,
also I'm currently in South Devon and I am seeing so much wonderful farming that's going on,
mm,
supported by local communities,
yep,
that's
yep.
carbon neutral. And
Mhm.
and that includes dairy, it includes beef, it includes everything. So this is exciting, and it's not what's being pushed from the top.
No,
It's
but
and two, and it's a reaction that comes from a real love of the
mhm,
land. And I think this is again that Jupiter, Uranus in Earth that is building up a
yep,
real love of the land that is saying, no, this is the humane way of doing things for the
yeah.
planet, for the animals, and for the humans, because so much of what is being pushed from the top is anti-human. And
Oh, I
in
agree with you. I agree with you. And the thing is, what we should both be doing. I mean, I mentor students. I don't actually do readings anymore, but I do refer people on. What we should be doing is watching, all of us astrologers should be watching 23 degrees Taurus, Scorpio, Leo, Aquarius, but particularly 23 degrees Taurus in our clients, in our students, in ourselves, because I've got it absolutely squaring my sun exactly opposite my Jupiter. So I I just don't want to become re-obsessed with Jupiter Uranus because I'm getting too old for that sort of thing. But I can feel it creeping up on me, and listening to your analysis and not having studied this conjunction, and you are perfectly expressing the way it's moving, is just so interesting to me. And
well,
it fits
so
the big pictures as well. It's amazing,
we have
really.
we have the People's Farming Alliance that's cropped up. We have and that's in a reaction to land being taken away from
Yeah,
farming for
yeah,
heaven knows what
yeah.
in Holland and other places.
Mhm,
So it's very worrying. But it's also more than that. It's just seeing local groups cropping up and doing deals with farmers and saying, okay, we're going to buy directly from you.
mhm,
And we've got 30 people that would like to buy directly from you as a group. So I'm seeing that happening a lot
mhm,
in different places. So this is
mhm.
tremendously exciting. And I have to own up to being 24 degrees Taurus myself. So
Yes.
so it's
So
off that junction.
fantastic. Oh, this is just great. So you're really, yeah, I mean, okay, I do apologize for getting so excited and pink cheeked. No doubt anyone watching this is going to be having a good laugh at my expense, but it's just so interesting. And the fact that you know what, Anna, I'm going to make you, with your permission and asking you, to be my one and only research subject for this particular conjunction. You don't have to, you don't have to volunteer, but I'm kind of twisting your arm very nicely up your back here.
I always feel that my experience is that I'd rather have the conjunctions and the trines,
Mhm.
which usually mean that I am working with the energy
Yep.
rather than energy being imposed upon me,
Yes.
rather
Well,
than squares or the oppositions. So there
well, the
you are.
thing is, Anna, that I have, with all my 6 lineups in Leo, fortunately for the world tucked away in the 12th house, I don't so much have transits as demolitions. You know, if when I had Pluto square the whole lot, and when I had Neptune opposite the whole lot, I mean, utter demolitions. So I'm now coming into Pluto, about to oppose all these Leo planets for probably the rest of my life. So I'm sort of reflecting on how I can harness this Plutonian energy in some sort of collective way. And there are already various things shaping up. And because I'm plugged so strongly into this Jupiter Uranus energy myself, um, we will have to compare notes, because my life is going to change at a stage where I feel I've had enough change. I'm too old for more change. I just want some peace. But the universe has other ideas, obviously, for both of us. So we'll have to wait and see.
I was just thinking though that the trick with these transits
Hmm.
is to work with the energy. And the reason I don't fare so well, and many of us don't fare so well when we have the squares or the oppositions, is because we're
Mhm,
fighting against
mhm,
the energy. And if we
mhm.
just surf and go with it, I think it probably would be a more constructive experience or a more pleasant experience. So I think when I'm considering what you're talking about and keeping in mind, I also, because of large stelliums, when they come at you, it is one after the
Yep,
other.
yep.
And I did spend my entire 20s with Pluto opposite something um
Mhm. Yeah.
card. So I have tremendous sympathy for what you're describing. And I think my suggestion is that it's probably a time for some deep healing that is needed.
I,
And if you embrace it in that vein,
I
you will.
think that is the gift of astrology. If you know astrology, you can, it's a double-edged gift, because, when I saw, for example, Neptune about to oppose everything for 10 years, it's not the easiest. And you do resist, but once you've got the point, and these long working transits take their time to make the point to you, then you have time to go, okay, I can see what this is. Let's try and work with it as best I can. And I think that's the best advice we can give to people as astrologers, is to just take your time to understand what's come your way and gradually ease yourself into working with it. And that will really help. I mean, you know that from your experience, and I know that from mine, and that's something we can share with people who are listening to us just now.
And that, to me, again, I will say this again, is the difference between the squares, the oppositions, and some of the conjunctions, as well, and compared to the trines and the sextiles, is, let's put it this way, with the trines, the sextiles, and some of the conjunctions, we're in the mood to cooperate and accept the energy.
Yeah.
And when it comes to the rest, we don't like it. It's, you know, we're fighting against it. So it's, but the energy is the energy. Pluto energy is Pluto energy. Jupiter energy is Jupiter energy. It's what the nature of the transit is showing is how accepting we are of that energy and how willing we are to work with it. So I think, as on a personal level, sometimes that's very difficult because we're human, and fear gets in the way of sometimes learning and growing. So those are the points at which we need other people to help us. So I would say, my advice is, if you're going through difficult transits, surround yourself with some good support. And if you feel like there's nobody there supporting you, change that. Look for that support. You know, and
you know, I agree with you. I would say that to anybody, but I would also say another way of putting all of this is that the squares and the oppositions may be the hardest transits to deal with. But if you take the view that all of these energies' purpose is to push forward at the evolution of our soul and our spirit, then the hard ones actually give you more opportunity to move on further in your evolution than the easier ones do. And that's been my experience. And that's been the experience of observing clients and students who have engaged with what the universe has brought them via symbolically via transits and progressions. If they're prepared to take on the difficult stuff, they can really move on with it in ways that you don't with the trines and sextiles, because it's more gentle. But unfortunately, the hard aspects can really flatten some people. I mean, let's face it, that happens to a lot of people.
of course,
I would be the last person to say you're only given what you can handle. I don't believe that to be true. I think that people are given awful stuff that they just can't handle. But in a sort of general spectrum of advice, the hard aspects, if they're worked with well, I think can move you forward in a way that perhaps the easiest ones can't.
and you're quite right, that we can be completely flat.
Oh yeah.
Those
Yeah.
very difficult life situations that are signified by the hard aspects. And again, I would say, don't do it on your own. You don't have to on your own. And you know, wearing my therapist hat, this is the stuff that I help people through all the time. And it's why I do what I do. So please, you know, if you're going through one of those that's leaving you completely flat, do find friends, family, or professional help, because you don't have to do it on your own. So coming back then to this Earth conjunction of Jupiter and Uranus, I think another element that could be expected with it would be the nurturing of the self and the body, and looking at nutrition in a very holistic way, as well. So I think if you're experiencing this in your chart, it's a really good time to be looking at that, looking at things in a very natural way. So I think we are going to see trends towards very natural foods rather than the highly processed stuff, which is very available.
Because it's damaging people's health so much.
It is.
So it'll be really interesting. I mean, I'm not going to be able to resist writing about all of this stuff because one of the things I love observing, and I'm sure you're like that as an astrologer as well, is when these big patterns are on the go and you're seeing all these things happening in the world, you're also seeing little chips of it moving through your consulting room or through your mentorees or through your students. It shows you that we are all connected, that everything is linked with everything else. And I share your optimism about the upcoming Jupiter Uranus conjunction in Taurus. I really hope that it does make us more in tune, work to be more in tune with the world that we live in, as opposed to fighting against it.
Well, Jupiter and Uranus are naturally optimistic, so we must be optimistic also.
Absolutely.
And
absolutely.
It's a note on which to end this particular conversation. And thank you so much for your time.
You are more than welcome, and I hope I haven't overexcited you by my excitement, but there you go. It's Jupiter Uranus we've been talking about, isn't it?
Of course,
anyway,
everything has to be big.
It's lovely to talk to you again, Anna.
Thank you. And so to remind everyone, the book that we have been discussing is called Jupiter Meets Uranus. And I'll be putting a link to that in the description box, along with Anne's website, which is Anne.
Oh, yeah, I'm still in Jupiter Uranus territory. My website is Writing from the 12th House, and it's www.anne-whitaker, WHITAKER.com.
Wonderful. I'll have a link to that in the description box as well. And so thank you. And
you are most welcome.
We will look forward to more conversations about other cycles in the future. But in the meantime, thank you all for watching. And next time, we're going to be looking at herbs and astrology. How's that for Uranus?
That sounds wonderful. I'll be watching that one for sure.
Until
okay, Anna.
Goodbye.